Well, good afternoon. I'm Rosalind Marsden, and I'm absolutely delighted to be invited to join you for this round table. It's an excellent initiative. I think that you've arranged this discussion, and thank you also to Waging Peace for also their role in supporting it. I wanted to say, first of all, I'm absolutely delighted to hear what our UK Special Envoy, Bob Fairweather, has said about the very clear and firm position that the British government is playing in terms of supporting the forces for freedom and change. Also, I think our ambassador in Khartoum has been very outspoken in support of the protest movement and the forces for freedom and change, and we're absolutely delighted to see that. I know that the UK has been active in the UN Security Council, I think, in trying to get a press statement, and after resistance from some members of the Council, you achieved that a couple of days ago, which is extremely good. Also, I understand work is going on to coordinate positions of international partners, and perhaps in the next few days, hopefully with some pressure on regional players, in order to try and exert maximum pressure on the military council. I just wanted to say, well, first of all, I wanted to say how sad and shocked and outraged I am by the savagery of the massacre on the 3rd of June, and its attempt to crush the hopes of the Sudanese people. I know that everyone is even more determined than before to continue to try to achieve the objectives of the revolution, and you have our full support in that. Just to take maybe a few concrete suggestions, I think that after the massacre of the 3rd of June, the whole question of accountability and justice has become a top priority. And it's good to see that a number of Western governments, and indeed the African Union as well, are pressing for an international investigation. It's encouraging that the African Union Peace and Security Council took such a strong position on the 7th of June, including calling for the chairman of the African Union Commission to look into ways of having an investigation with input from Sudanese stakeholders as well as the African Commission for Human and People's Rights. So there's an opportunity there for Sudanese civil society and lawyers, I imagine, to feed in your ideas to the African Union on that process. It was also very good to see 5 of the UN human rights experts jointly calling for human rights monitors to be deployed in Sudan. Of course, we've now heard the Transitional Military Council saying they reject any international investigation. But I think, given the degree of international outrage at what has happened, and I'm glad to say mounting international media coverage of what's going on in Sudan, I think now is a very good moment to press for this international investigation. And then there's also an important opportunity coming up at the Human Rights Council session, which starts in about 8 days' time in Geneva. And normally Sudan is not on the agenda for the June session of the Human Rights Council. But I understand that some of the human rights community are proposing to press that there should be a sort of emergency discussion, an emergency session to discuss what's happened in Sudan at this coming session. And we know that the UK has been very prominent as a member of the Human Rights Council, so we hope that there will be some also work done to try and take advantage of that opportunity. In that context, what the diaspora can do is clearly to make your contribution to raising awareness in the media, which I know many of you have been doing, trying to document evidence of what's happened in a systematic and usable way. I know that there are hundreds of videos and other documentary evidence, and so that needs to be compiled and documented. And also, of course, we hope that human rights defenders will go to Geneva, possibly to hold side events on Sudan to draw attention to the situation. Moving on the diplomatic front, Bob Fairweather has described what's happening I think we're all very conscious that a crucial point is to try to put maximum pressure on the military council through its allies in the region, particularly on Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates and Egypt, to get them to accept that there has to be a transition to a civilian-led government if they want to see stability in Sudan. Without stability in Sudan, there will be destabilising effects for the whole region, and that they need to stop giving financial and political support to Hemeti in particular. We're very encouraged, at least I'm very encouraged, to see the United States government now playing a very proactive diplomatic role, sending its assistant secretary for Africa, the top diplomat in the State Department, to Sudan the other day, appointing finally a US Special Envoy for Sudan, Ambassador Donald Booth, all of which are very positive signs that the US is going to really get engaged, and also the fact they made it known that a week or so ago one of their top diplomats spoke to the Saudi and Emirati ministers, and we've seen some reflection, I think, of that. Those exchanges in some of the statements coming out of the Gulf more recently. There's of course also mention in the African Union Peace and Security Council communique the possibility that sanctions could be applied automatically if there is resistance from individuals or other entities to a transition to civilian-led rule. We trust that threat will be, that there will be a lot of preparatory work done just in case that is necessary. And another point, of course, is to look very carefully at the sources of funding going to Hemeti, not just in connection with the Yemen war, but also from things like gold in the Jebel and the gold mines, his involvement in other business activities. Perhaps finally just a mention of Darfur, because I'm very conscious that the Rapid Support Force has for years been carrying out atrocities in Darfur, in many ways at the Nuba Mountains and Blue Nile, but in many ways so similar to exactly what's going on now in Khartoum. And it has not attracted the degree of international attention that it should have done. It's a relief to see that UNAMID has now taken the decision to halt its withdrawal plans from Darfur until the political situation is a lot clearer. I think we have all been dismayed to hear that most of their team sites in Darfur have ended up in the hands of the Rapid Support Force, which, given the atrocities that force is now involved in Khartoum, is obviously something that cannot be tolerated. So I think that is a step forward. There's also the question of an arms embargo, as there is an arms embargo on Darfur. The question is whether it could or should now be extended to the whole of Sudan. And then, of course, the question of the International Criminal Court. The Special Prosecutor, Fatima Bensouda, briefs the Security Council twice a year on the efforts of the court to progress their case. Obviously, they're very frustrated that it hasn't been possible to arrest the key indictees, and I hope it will be possible to repeat a message to the military authorities now that Omar al-Bashir and the other indictees need to be handed over to the court. I'll finish there. Thank you very much.